There's a sentence you heard growing up that still lives in your body. You might not remember when it was first said, but you remember how it made you feel. Small, wrong, like something about you needed to be fixed. The strange part? When you try to explain it to someone else, it sounds completely normal. That's just parenting, they say. My parents said stuff like that too. And maybe they did, but not all language lands the same way. Some sentences discipline behavior, others rewire identity. This video is about learning to tell the difference. Last video, we broke down the 3 psychological engines behind toxic parenting, what's happening inside the parent that creates the pattern. Today, we're going one level deeper. The language itself, the exact phrases, what they're actually communicating underneath, and what each one trains inside the child who hears it over and over again. By the end, you'll recognize 3 distinct types instantly: shame language, control language, and what I call reality reset language. One attacks who you are, one controls what you're allowed to do, and one makes you question whether your own feelings are real. Halfway through, there's a quick test that makes it obvious which type shaped you the most. Then in the next video, we'll cover how to actually respond to each type without escalating, the exact phrases that keep you grounded when the old patterns get triggered. But first, type 1, the language that doesn't criticize what you did. It criticizes who you are. Type 1 is shame programming. This is language that bypasses behavior entirely and goes straight for identity. Not, that was a mistake, but what's wrong with you? Not, that choice didn't work out, but you're an embarrassment. The target isn't the action. The target is the self. Here's how it sounds. Why can't you be more like your sister? You're too much. You're so dramatic. Nobody's going to want to deal with you if you act like that. These phrases don't offer correction. They offer a verdict. And when you hear them enough as a child, you stop questioning the verdict. You just accept it as fact. What's actually being communicated underneath? Your feelings are a problem. Your needs are a burden. Who you naturally are is fundamentally flawed, and love requires becoming someone else. The child learns that visibility is dangerous, that being seen, truly seen, leads to rejection. So they start hiding. They shrink. They develop a radar for what's acceptable and slowly abandon everything that isn't. Here's what this creates in adulthood: perfectionism that never feels like enough, no matter how much you achieve. People-pleasing that exhausts you but feels impossible to stop because approval became survival. A fear of being seen that you can't quite explain because on the surface you seem fine. You've just learned to perform fine so well that even you forgot it was a performance. You might also notice you apologize constantly, flinch at criticism even when it's constructive, or feel a deep sense of shame that doesn't attach to anything specific. It's just there, humming in the background, waiting to be confirmed. If type 1 shaped you, there's a phrase that might help when the old voice shows up. That's criticism, not truth. Simple but powerful. Criticism reflects the speaker's limitations, not yours. You don't have to keep believing the verdict someone gave you before you were old enough to question it. Now, if type 1 attacks who you are, type 2 controls what you're allowed to do, and it usually disguises itself as love. Type 2 is control and conditional love. This is language that makes approval feel earned, that treats connection like a transaction. The phrases sound caring on the surface, which is exactly what makes them so confusing. Here's how it sounds. After everything I've done for you, if you really loved me, you would. I sacrificed so much for you, and this is how you repay me? Don't be ungrateful. Because I said so. Notice the structure. There's always an invisible contract being enforced, one you never agreed to, one you didn't even know existed until you violated it. What's actually being communicated? Obedience equals love. Disagreement equals betrayal. Your autonomy is a threat to the relationship, so you learn to abandon it in order to stay safe. The child internalizes a brutal equation. I can have my own opinions, or I can be loved. Not both. Here's what this creates in adulthood: chronic guilt that shows up whenever you prioritize yourself. Difficulty saying no even to things that drain you. A freeze response when someone expresses disappointment, because disappointment used to mean withdrawal of love. You might even find yourself in relationships where you're constantly earning approval, constantly proving yourself, never quite feeling secure no matter how much you give. If type 2 shaped you, here's a boundary script that doesn't escalate, but doesn't abandon you either. I hear you. I'm still going to make my own decision. You don't have to justify, explain, or defend. You're allowed to hear someone's feelings and still choose differently. Now, before type 3, let's make this concrete. Here's the quick test I mentioned at the beginning. 3 questions. Answer honestly. First, did you often feel ashamed of who you are, not just what you did? Like something about your personality or your needs was fundamentally wrong? Second, did love feel conditional? Did you feel like you had to earn it through obedience, performance, or staying small? Third, did you constantly doubt your own feelings or memory? Did you often wonder if you were overreacting, being too sensitive, or making things up? Whichever question resonated most reveals the primary language pattern you grew up with. The first is type 1, shame programming. The second is type 2, control and conditional love. The third is type 3, and this one is the most disorienting because it makes you question reality itself. Type 3 is reality reset language. This is the category that flies under the radar because it doesn't sound aggressive, it sounds reasonable, concerned even. But what it actually does is erase your experience and replace it with the parent's version of events. Here's how it sounds. You're too sensitive. That never happened. You're overreacting. I was just joking. Why do you take everything so seriously? You always twist my words. I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this. Notice what's happening. Your perception is being invalidated. Your memory is being questioned. Your emotional response is being treated as the problem rather than the thing that caused it. What's actually being communicated? Your version of reality is unreliable. My version is the truth. If we disagree about what happened, you're the one who's wrong. The child learns that their inner experience can't be trusted, that they need external validation to know what's real. They stop believing their own instincts. Here's what this creates in adulthood: chronic self-doubt, even about things you clearly remember. Decision paralysis because you've learned not to trust your own judgment. Constantly seeking reassurance from others before you let yourself believe something is true. Apologizing when you've done nothing wrong, just in case you're missing something. A vague sense that you're always one step away from being exposed as irrational or crazy. You might also notice that you over-explain yourself, that you rehearse conversations before having them, that you keep receipts and screenshots, not because you're paranoid, but because somewhere along the way you learned that your word alone isn't enough. If type 3 shaped you, here are 2 anchors that might help. First, an internal one. My feelings are data. I don't need permission to feel them. Your emotions are valid information about your experience, not evidence that something's wrong with you. Second, a boundary for conversations. We remember it differently. I'm not debating my feelings. You don't have to convince anyone that your experience is real. It's real because you lived it. Their agreement isn't required. So here's what I need you to understand about all 3 types. These language patterns weren't usually intentional. Most parents using them are repeating what they heard growing up, running scripts they never examined, managing their own unprocessed emotions through their children. That context matters for understanding, but it doesn't undo the impact. You can hold compassion for why it happened and still acknowledge that it left marks. The goal isn't to label your parents as toxic or to build a case against them. The goal is to name the pattern so it stops controlling you. Because here's what happens when these phrases go unexamined. They become your inner voice. That critical narrator in your head telling you you're too much. That's type 1, internalized. That guilt that floods in whenever you prioritize yourself. Type 2, still running. That constant questioning of whether your feelings are valid. Type 3, echoing decades later. Naming the pattern is how you separate their voice from yours. It's how you start recognizing when you're reacting to the present versus when you're reacting to something that was installed a long time ago. The phrase loses power the moment you see where it came from. It stops feeling like truth and starts feeling like a relic, something you inherited but didn't choose, something you can finally set down. Here's the shift that changes everything. You don't have to unlearn all of it at once. You just have to catch it in the moment. When the shame flares up, pause and ask, is this mine or is this something I was taught to feel? When the guilt floods in, notice it and ask, is this real or is this an old pattern trying to keep me compliant? When you start doubting your own experience, remind yourself, I'm allowed to trust my perception even if someone else disagrees. That awareness is the beginning. Each time you notice the pattern instead of being swallowed by it, something small shifts. The voice gets a little quieter. The reaction gets a little less automatic. You start to see the difference between who you actually are and who you were trained to become. That's not healing overnight, but it is healing in real time. And it adds up faster than you'd expect once you know what you're looking for. So tell me, which type did you hear the most growing up? Which phrases are still running in your head? Drop it in the comments. I want to know which part of this finally put words to something you've been carrying. If this gave you language for patterns you couldn't name before, subscribe. We break down the psychology behind everyday behavior in a way that makes sense. The next video shifts focus, but it's connected. It's about the psychology of fake friends and why people who grew up with these language patterns often attract the same dynamics later in life. Once you see how the wiring carries over, a lot of your relationship history starts making sense. I'll see you there.